Hello, hello, Pleasure Circle. Y'all are in for a treat. Do you know why? Once a month, we do a live podcast recording. So this is totally just for the Pleasure Circle. So everyone in this community. So thank you so much for being a part of the community. And I get to bring in some of my favorite people, like experts of embodiment and sex and yumminess and all the things that y'all always want. I'm bringing that in to you for you to eat it up. You eat it up. So because this is a live podcast recording, it means that you get to be a part of it, right? So if you have questions, if you have comments, if there are things coming up while we have our guests speaking, go ahead and comment. You can tag your friends because we really want this to be for you. It's like applicable for you. Take the tools, use them, have crazy hot sex because of it. We're ready to give that to you. And I just want to remind everyone before we dive into the podcast today that we have Creatrix coming up in less than 2 weeks, about 10 days or so. And almost all of you have already gotten your tickets. So thank you so much for jumping in because I'm looking at those applications and I'm actually designing the curriculum based on what you need. So this is really exciting and it's so juicy and so yummy. Think 3 days of sex magic. First sex magic with yourself, then with your partner, then with your business. That's what we're playing in. So that's Creatrix, and I'll drop the link later in this chat, but you can find it anywhere in the Pleasure Circle, to be honest. All right, so jumping into this podcast, one of the reasons I created this podcast is because I really love connecting with my community and connecting with my friends. And I was like, I feel like I should just do this publicly. Like I should just hang out with really cool people publicly, which is kind of what this is. And it's honestly like a great excuse for me to get to hang out with people that I love and like want to chill with. So I'm bringing you someone amazing today who's a friend of mine, who's in a similar community of mine. And she's just rocking it, teaching so many people and leading so many people into their sexual exuberance. I love your bio, so I'm going to read it because I really love it, and then I'll bring you in. So Caitlin Victorious is our guest for today, and Caitlin is a sex and relationship coach who helps men and women become amazing lovers and incredible partners. Formerly a sexual health researcher and policy analyst, smarty. She was catapulted into internet stardom after a video featuring her went viral. She works with clients all over the world on mismatched libidos, so things to start thinking about, those of you watching, right? If these are you. Mismatched libidos, enjoying sex more, ending premature ejaculation and erectile dysfunction, and developing unshakable sexual confidence, which is what we do here in Pleasure Circle. Combining personal experience with evidence-based science in her coaching, Caitlin's mission is to create a sex and pleasure positive world. And then I dropped her links there so you can check out more of her YouTube channel and her website. And Caitlin, I'm so incredibly happy to have you on. It's so much fun to get to hang out with you today.
Yay. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so honored to be your guest and talking to everyone today. So thank you.
Yeah, totally. This is so fun. So, all right. So you kind of like I got really turned on when I was reading about the policy analyst and like sexual health researcher. Was that kind of your first foray into this world of sexual awakening and sexual health for everyone? Or did you do anything before that? What was it like?
I knew that I wanted to do something sex and sexuality related, but even from a really early on, like 13, 14, 15 years old, like I saw the way that sex was talked about in health class, and I had my own early sexual awakening and sexual experiences. And I was like, these two things are not the same. Like the sex that I'm having at home with my like high school boyfriend and the way that sex is being painted here in my public school do not align. And I think I had a deep sense that like this is what I was going to do with my life, but I also was drilled into me from my parents that I was going to go to college. I was the first generation of people to like go get a bachelor's degree, and I had to do it. And so I had to figure out a way to make those two things make sense. And at the time, I said I was going to be a sexologist. And I decided to go this like very empirical science, but like very, as proper as could be. It was like the properest way to study sex and sexuality. And I made it all the way up to my doctoral degree. And that was when I finally was like, I have got to get out of the ivory tower. Like, I want to help people one-on-one to actually have better sex. And I loved working, like no shade at all. The academy is important and research really matters. And it's just a very slow moving machine. And I really felt that the tools that we have available to us, particularly as coaches too, are so big and so vast and so amazing. And, you were talking about it earlier, like 3 days of sex magic, the fucking sign. Oh, I hope I can cuss. Sign me up. But that's something that I wouldn't be able to like do or talk about or recommend within the ivory tower because it's not been, empirically reviewed and published in a peer-reviewed journal. And so I got out of there, and it gave me access to like the whole world so that I could paint with all the colors.
And what are you most enjoying painting in now? Like what colors are your paintbrushes of the, outside of the ivory tower? Where are you going? Where are you going with it?
That's excellent. So my main paintbrush is video for sure. And I paint a lot on YouTube. And the cool thing about YouTube is that it's totally the Wild West. Like video is the Wild West on the internet right now. The internet is still the Wild West. Like it's changed a lot from the internet that we had when it first came out. And you could go on like Wikipedia and look up like penguins, and it would be like penguins' favorite food is pasta, and they live all over Toledo, Ohio. Like it was just nonsense all day every day. But the internet is still really fresh, and there's a combination of like this sort of emerging sense of like what truth is and what facts are on the internet, and it's a little bit blurrier than what I think I am personally grew up with, when I'm personally comfortable with. And so I'm trying to like hit this sweet spot, which is giving people information. Like this is the paintbrush I want to paint in, like making stuff really accessible to people and basing it in truth. And if it's not in like peer-reviewed truth, but like truth, anecdotal truth, like truth that I've seen it work with my clients or your clients, or we're talking about it within our community, and we know that it's effective, at least for certain people. And so I'm trying to create like information that entertains people and educates people, but also like gives them something that is going to actually change their sex life or their relationship forever. And that's the paintbrush I find myself using the most.
Yeah, that's so fun. And I'm just curious, like, what are the things that you find yourself showing them the most on video? Like what are in your YouTube, but what are the most people struggling with? Like, what do they want to hear the most about?
Yeah. So I found that my like specific niche that works really well for me, or like the people that chose to work with me, not the other way around. Like it just kind of happened this way, were cisgender heterosexual men who have a ton of anxiety around sex. And so my main thing that I end up educating and talking about a lot is on destigmatizing and deshaming sex itself. Also giving these people, and when we think of like heterosexual cis men, as a collective, as a group, they kind of wrote the book on what sex is supposed to be and how we're supposed to have it, right? The sexual loop.
Totally.
But as individuals, that same blueprint that the book that they collectively wrote, which is damaged to people of non-binary folks and queer folks and all of us that have kind of felt like we threw the short end of that stick, but it also as individuals has done a lot of damage to the men who don't like live up and fit or conform into the idea of what that sort of like hegemonic view of sexuality is supposed to be. And so they also take a brunt, right? They also feel like they're failing to live up to a standard that they themselves or people who look like them set. And so I think what I get to do really is like love people, we get to just love people and encourage them to express themselves in a way that's right for them, and know that that's totally normal. It's totally okay. It's totally perfect exactly as it is. And I think that's my main, it becomes ever more clear that my main tool is just loving people.
Yeah, basically. So I'm curious about for clients that come to you that have physical things, right? I'm thinking of what my audience will want to ask, right? And I'm like, I know they're going to ask questions about this, but like premature ejaculation, right? How will loving them support them in this physical thing that's happening, right? How are you going to help them? Because they're like, right? Help me. How do we help them?
I'm so glad that you asked, because premature ejaculation is totally my main calling card. It's the thing that I got known for on the
Mm.
internet, which again, I was kind of a surprise to me, because I was like a queer researcher who was studying like bisexual women's perceptions of their vulvas, and all of a sudden I'm like a premature ejaculation expert. um, but so much of premature ejaculation, like 98% of people who deal with PE, it's a psychological cause that is causing them to ejaculate early. So there are a percentage of people for whom it is biological, and all the evidence suggests that it just really evolved because they were really good at getting their DNA out, and so they produced more babies. So actually
Wow.
ejaculating quickly is really effective if you are going to, like, avoid getting eaten by a saber-toothed tiger when you're taking a moment to mate in the bushes. Really effective strategy for mating. But for the 98% of guys, and remember, PE affects some, the, of course, the numbers are never perfect, but like 1 in 3 or so men have dealt with premature ejaculation, and about 1 in 7 deal with it on a pretty regular basis. And this is a ton of people. I mean, we're talking about like that number is significantly larger than the number of people who deal with erectile dysfunction. But because there's not a pill that can overcome the psychological issue that causes PE, there's not a big market for it, and therefore we don't talk about it so much, right? The best that the market can offer is like numbing sprays, which at, as a sex coach, the idea of like numbing against sex is so terrifying. It's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Uh, and so because 98% of it is what's going on up here, my job is really helping to, and this is where the love comes in, helping people to understand that the pressure that they're putting on themselves is just that. Like, it's just pressure that they're putting on themselves. Or, so many men, and I say men in particular, just because I have not met a ton of I haven't met many queer people who deal with premature ejaculation. I've never met a non-binary person who deals with premature ejaculation. I think it really is something that cisgender heterosexual men are the primary
Yeah.
sufferers of. And of course, it has a lot to do with gender and sexuality, right? Because that's where the pressure is coming from. It's like,
Yeah.
this is how I'm supposed to perform. There's also a little bit of a sense of like guilt. I think a lot of men today feel a really thick, really like ominous sense of guilt for their sexuality and for their desire to be sexual beings, right? There's this sense of like, if I express myself sexually, am I going to hurt someone? Am I inconveniencing, right? Because we have this narrative that women don't like sex, and therefore men are like, in a straight relationship, the man's like tricking her into sex, right?
Yeah.
He's trading comfort for sex, or security or marriage or something for sex, right?
Mm.
Instead of seeing sex as this like gift that they're sharing between them.
Mm.
And I think that is a particularly noxious mixture. And it's any wonder that you would ejaculate quickly. Your body goes, oh my gosh, this feels great. And and somehow I'm hurting her. Let's just get it over with real quick.
Mm. Wow, there's so much in there. There's so much in there to unpack. I'm loving like how deeply you've gone into this. I can tell that you've worked with a good bit of people around this, and I'm curious more about when you started speaking about kind of this overwhelming feeling that comes in, right? Because sex is inherently, when we're actually feeling it or not using the numbing spray, it's a very intense sensation, emotionally,
Mm-hmm.
physically, energetically. Right. And so how do we work how do you help people with like holding that much intensity, with being okay with that much intensity? 'Cause most of us just go around numbing and dulling ourselves. Right. So how do we do
Totally.
that?
But
Yeah.
it starts with being able to hold that much intensity on your own, right?
Mhm.
Because so much of, especially the people that come to work with me, they've been numbing through porn. And so
Mhm.
when their relationship to themselves sexually is already mediated by this like outside factor, and this way of like mediating and sort of taking away the immediacy of sex with ourselves, of like just connecting with ourselves, that can feel extremely intense to the people I work with. And so I like to really start by honing in on their sexual relationship with their own body. It's so counterintuitive because I think the way that I saw the men that I work with before I worked with them was I thought that they were like really, they were like they worshiped their cocks. That was their dude. And maybe they made decisions with him, or he was like the star of the show. But what I've actually learned is I do an exercise often with my clients where I'll just have them like cup their cock, and we'll write a love letter together. I'll have them kind of like, I'll get them started, but we'll write just like a love letter. Like, think of all of the wonderful, amazing experiences that you've had with him, like that he led you through the pleasure, if you have kids, like what he did to create those kids. Like, and what happens 100% of the time is that he has never ever taken the time to just appreciate all the wonderful things that this part of his body has done for him. He's only ever looked at his cock as a problem, something that needed to be improved, maybe something that was a nuisance, and usually something that like was just meant to perform for him on demand, and you get out of the way otherwise. And when we start to shift that relationship, that even in itself can be a lot of intensity. And I've had plenty of clients who just in doing that exercise it has opened up more doors for healing shame, for healing, shame around being turned on. Maybe you've experienced this as well. My clients, if they get turned on during our work together, which is not uncommon, like it's okay. The amount of shame that they have around experiencing turn on in the presence of another person that they're not being sexual with can also be, this is also a super intense experience for people. And as we start to like melt away that intensity, the sensation and the intensity of sex and connecting with another person starts to be more manageable for them.
Yeah, I'm loving this. What I'm hearing you say is like, start with yourselves, right? Start with yourself, which is what that's why self-pleasure is like the thing that I teach, because that's where it starts. I don't think you can really be good, whatever good means, but I don't think you can really be fully into making love fully and completely if you don't have that with yourself first, right? If you haven't fully loved yourself and gone deeply into your own body. And it's, for me, my external relationships are always such a mirror for what's happening internally, right? If I can't fully give myself to my partner, where am I not giving myself to me, right? And it's such a beautiful mirror. So I just want everyone to hear, because it's almost like I want everyone to hear that like Mama Bear's been saying this forever. So now Caitlin is also saying this, self-pleasure first, because they're always asking me, but how do I do this with my partner? How do I get my partner to do this? Always, always, always self first. Always, 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 especially with sexuality. And the other thing, this is just something that, I've been playing a lot with the cis hetero market and just with a few of my clients and a few of my lovers, there's this, it feels like there's this piece around good guy, bad guy, right? And this piece around like, oh, I can't really go all in with my partner or my lover, because then I'll be, I don't want to be perceived as the one that's taking my pleasure. I don't want to be that, like, I don't want to be that guy. And so I see a lot of men walking around kind of disconnected from their cocks because they don't want to be that guy. So I work with it energetically, but I'm curious what you're playing with there, or if any of your men come into you with that kind of question and qualm.
Totally. Although I don't think they've been able to articulate that,
it. Yeah.
right? Because you nailed it. It's the good guy, bad guy dichotomy that like you can't really win no matter where you fit into it. Because the good guy, he doesn't win either. He doesn't really get to have great, hot, fiery, passionate sex. Like sometimes he'll touch decent sex and feel like that's all that there is, and that's not what we want for our clients. And then of course, like you said, like no one wants to be the bad guy, right? So a lot of what I do, in addition to playing with that energetically, is helping people to understand and sort of like decouple that narrative from the narrative that they want to live by. I think this is a cornerstone of my work, is like, let's pull apart the stuff that came from your parents, the stuff that came from your culture and your friends at school, and the stuff that like you really want to believe. And I think something that you and I really have in common, if I could project onto you, is that we've spent, uh, and I saw a picture of you as a teenager recently, so I actually feel like I know this to be true. We spent time even early on in life just being different,
Mm-hmm.
and learning how to accept ourselves. And I don't know what your journey was like, but I imagine that it had ups and downs just like mine, of figuring out how to love and accept the version of me that wanted to be expressed at all times, and having a relationship with like my internal expression that eventually, and it's like it's always a journey, it's always in progress, but accepting that I wasn't going to fit into the narrative that was going to be most acceptable to the most number of people. I saw earlier today, like the reward for fitting in is that everyone likes you except for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of the people who are drawn to work with me, they can sense that. They have a feeling of like, I've been trying to fit in to what I thought sex was supposed to be, what a relationship was supposed to be. And I've been playing by the rules, and it's not getting me the success that I was promised. I've been being the good guy, and it's not getting me the great hot sex that I thought that was going to happen at the end of this. And so my responsibility is to help them to realize that it's actually safe for them to step into that self-expression. It's actually safe
Yeah.
for them to claim the sex and the sexuality that they really desire, because it's actually what's happening all the time underneath the surface anyway.
Yeah. And I would go even for what I've noticed is that the second that the sex becomes unsafe, so to speak, right? Which isn't even like a thing, right? But the second that it becomes unsafe is when that person hasn't done enough of their own inner work, right? They haven't done enough. I can see it. I'm like, it's almost like they dissociate and they all of a sudden are in their head and they're not present with their partner anymore because of the intensity gets so big. So I just want everyone, I'm putting this in, I work in frames and steps, right? So like step one, self-pleasure, self, bring it into yourself, right? Hold the intensity in your body. And then the next step is fully express yourself. Now that you've got that, let's go into full expression. And then my curiosity, Caitlin, is what happens in your couples? I know what happens with my couples, and you work just with the men, right? Not with their partners as well, or do you do both?
For the most part, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
you're kind of playing with it. Okay, cool. So because I know one of the fears of a lot of my couples, right? And this kind of is all genders with this fear. When I step into my full self, I won't be lovable. I will be too much. My partner can't handle it. I married them 25 years ago, so they're going to leave me when I step into who I am, right? Like all of this stuff starts to come up that's kept us boxed forever and ever. So can you speak to speak to whatever comes up for you, but I'm thinking like what happens when one person actually steps into their full self? How does that change the relationship and the partnership? Yeah.
I love that. You know, in my experience witnessing the men I've worked with who are part of couples, universally good things have come of it. Like all the stuff that they were afraid was going to happen is usually exactly the opposite. Their partner goes, "Oh my gosh, I've been waiting for you to like embody you this whole time. I didn't know that's what I was waiting for, but now that I have it, I can see it." And like, then the next thing that they know, they're actually having the opposite reaction, because they're like, "Oh my gosh, I stepped into my full self-expression. Now she's fully self-expressed. Now she wants to hire a kink coach, and she's dressed up in leather and she's going out with her other lover on Saturday night. This is not what I thought was going to happen, right?" But it's this idea that the more like that like more self-expression or more love begets more love, right? And because and I don't know that I've ever put this together, but this is what's coming to me, is like that step into full self-expression, whatever that looks like, requires such a deep self-acceptance, because you have to let go, right? Like you have to be willing to totally surrender and go like, I might end up alone. She might take the kids and run. I might lose my job because someone's going to see me posting this stuff on the internet. I'm not going to be acceptable at work anymore. But that surrender is so ironically the exact thing that we need in order to reclaim our relationships. and to stop clinging to what we want them to be and how we want them to be, or how they were 25 years ago. When we're actually really to surrender, we get to experience like the real wonder and the real presence of a relationship.
Yeah. Which is what all of us are actually craving, right? Yeah. It's like, it goes beyond the sex. And I mean, I've seen this in my own life so many times. I had a huge upgrade last month, and then Sabrina went off on a retreat and had a huge upgrade. And then they came back, and just last week we were like, oh, look at us now. Like, who are we in this this is scary. Like, there's this scary aliveness to to what happens when couples actually become each other's, I don't know, like mirrors for potential instead of boxing each other in. Right. And then you lose your life force after a while when you're in that all day long. So it takes a lot of courage, and it takes a lot of surrender to be like, yeah, I'm going to just trust this thing. And like,
scary aliveness.
It's totally scary aliveness, which is the same as the intensity of sex, right? See, it's all parallel. Right. It's all parallel. We have a great question from the audience that I want to ask you. So tips for people. So when they self-pleasure, and the self-pleasure is a means to calm down, or I'm guessing this person also meant like a release, like before bed. And it's like established. It's become an established part of their routine. How do we move ourselves out of that, like kind of routine release, to find the self-pleasure that we're speaking of, right?
Yeah. Okay. I love this so much. One of the first assignments I ever like really figured out helped men to overcome their ejaculation challenges and like extend their stamina was to change different variables every single time that you self-pleasure. So the variables could be as easy as starting with like your body position, because most of us have a way. Lay on my back, I use my right hand, maybe my left hand squeezes my nipples or something. Like, we have sort of an established pattern. And so the first thing I'd have them do is like get into doggy style. If you're imagining that your partner is bend over in front of you, or stand up, so switching up your body positions, number one, and then switch up your location. Like, especially if you live alone, or there's times of the day where your house is empty, or at least you can switch up between like bathroom and bedroom. But of course, if you live alone, then you can try kitchen and hallway and laundry.
Over by the window. That's me.
Yeah. Hot tub, like I had a client who we were working together, and he worked on like this remote technologies that were like literally located in the middle of like national forests and parks. And so he was masturbating all over like national parks. And he's like, Caitlin, today I had to work on this piece of technology that was all the way up at the top of a mountain. And it was on the top of this mountain, and I was jerking off, and I ejaculated everywhere. And I was like, this is the best. Like, that is the shit. If you can go out into the woods and be totally private, I'm not recommending you do anything illegal. But if you have some wooded area that's yours and you're safe to do it, I say go for it. Change up your location. And then finally, of course, you change up like the time of day or the way that you're self-pleasuring. If you're using technology, you switch to your hand, switch to your left hand, things along those lines. And the reason for this is that because the sexual response cycle is so closely associated with how we evolved and our evolution. It's part of our lizard brain, and our brain is really good at figuring out the shortest path between A and B. And B in this case is like mating, right? Our lizard brain doesn't know the difference between I'm watching porn versus I'm actually having sex with like 11 different women today, right? The lizard brain is not that complicated. It can't tell. It has no sense of imagination. It just sees things in front of it. It can't tell if those are real or fake, or in the future or the past. And so what it does is it figures out how to get to the ejaculation in particular as quickly and as routinely as possible. And that's why you have to scramble it by throwing all of these different variables at it in order to break that habit. It's a actual process of breaking a habit that your body thinks, and your lizard brain thinks it actually has evolved. It thinks that it's like, every single night it's mating. And so it's just like, let's just keep going. This is obviously working.
I am so geeking out. Like I don't, cause so much of my sexual background has just been like watching people and creating my own knowledge around it. Right. Is I've just always been in those scenarios. And I'm just like, my brain is going, Caitlin, I want every book that you ever write. I want every, like, I just like, give me all the info. Cause my sex geek is on full fire right now. Yes. I'm like, of course that makes so much sense. And that also makes sense why couples get into their ruts, right? Of like, it's always missionary. It's always every third Thursday. It's always like, right?
Totally. You're overcoming a ton of biology to make any adjustments to that.
Oh, that's wild. I love it. My mind is going poof, 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 poof. Do you have any other cool sex geek facts that you want to share before we'll probably end in a little bit, but
do you know why women in particular that make noise during sex?
I don't. I'm assuming to open up their pussies. Like there's some sort of wiring. I don't know. That's like so energetically the throat and
energetically,
the pussy, right? Which is where I play. But tell me about the science. I'm so excited.
I love that. And I think that it's not a coincidence that that's also true. So the process is called female copulatory vocalizations. And it's witnessed. So anytime that something happens in like every different culture and all the different continents, we can pretty much guarantee that it evolved for a reason. And women, pardon the term, making noise during sex basically evolved on every single continent and every single culture. It's like one of the universal things about sex. And so this means it has an evolutionary benefit to it. And the theory is that because when a female member of a tribe or a group is mating, well, she might be ovulating, right? And so you want to increase the odds that she would end up with child and end up giving birth to that child. And so her making noise is a way of signaling to the men of that group that there's a woman who is mating so that they can also come and mate with her. Our standard way of being is the gangbang. It's the gangbang, and her screams of pleasure are the invitation to the gangbang.
Oh my God, I just got so excited. This is so cool. Oh my God, our standard way of being is the gangbang. I'm quoting you on this because it's just like, that's fucking epic, Caitlin. And I love that you did the research around it.
That's one of my favorite sex facts of all time.
So women, anytime you have any moments of shame, right, around wanting a gangbang or experiencing a gangbang, it is your standard way of being, right?
Thank your ancestors. Thank your ancestors who were gangbanging it up for millennia.
Right, to create you, right? Like, let's like,
I got here.
How awesome is that? Oh my gosh, I love it so much. Caitlin, you're just such a doll. You're such a treat. I love it. And your sex geek brain makes me so incredibly, I feel like you're like talking dirty to me through like sex facts. Like, I'm like, ooh, what's next? Tell me all the things. So tell us about I almost called it your sex school because that's what I feel like it should be. But tell us about your sex school. What do you have out there for those of us that want to nerd out with you and grow into like, hey, this is what's possible. This is how we can evolutionarily change our sex lives. Where do we go? Where do we find you?
Yeah. So best place to find me is on YouTube. I have a hard to spell name, so you can just search for Better Sex Coach on YouTube and that will find me, and then you don't have to worry about the 11 ways to spell Caitlin. And if you're interested in lasting longer in bed, I actually have a special discount code for my flagship course, and I can send that to you. And if you want to post it in Facebook, anyone who is interested in checking that out, please do. It's 98% effective. It's exactly what I developed after working one-on-one with clients and realizing I wanted to create something that people could do in their own time without needing to work with me. And so I'm happy to share that with your listeners and your community.
That's so beautiful. Thank you so much, y'all. That's such an amazing gift. I wish I had a cock so I could take the course and experience lasting longer in bed. Not that I need to, but I just want to geek about it. All right. So before we go, I love to ask people, because because of the work that you're doing in the world, right? Because of who you be and your mission, and obviously your passion for this. Like, I feel the both of us are so giddy. It's like we're like our little inner science, sexy science dorks get to come out, and it's so much fun. What is the world going to experience when your mission gets out there? Like, what's possible for all of us? We're going to end on that.
Mm. You know, there's a saying in academia that is research is me search, right? And so we go into studying the thing that we most want and most want to understand. Like we're always just, it's all just a reflection of us, like you said earlier. And the thing that I want more than anything for the people whom my mission touches is the thing that I want for me, and that is ease. I want to experience the joy and the pleasure of sex and sexuality with ease. May it be easy for all of us.
That's right. And I think our world as a whole right now, after the pandemic and just where we are in society, there is such a craving for this ease. So thank you so much for helping to spread it in the world and for coming on and geeking out and talking to us. And yay. And everyone just blow up the chats for Caitlin, and we'll give you the code and the discount and all the juicy juice after. But Caitlin, thank you again. I just adore you. Mwah! And I'll see you soon. Bye, honey.